Hi, this is Emily Saliers from Indigo Girls, and you're listening to Rainbow Country.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, a spotlight on gay adult entertainer Dallas Steele. That and more on episode 414. So stay tuned. The Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the Beat Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello, and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT FM in Toronto, and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's Gay and Lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as a #1 Canadian LGBT podcast on Feedspot.com. So today, gay adult male entertainer Dallas Steele is my guest and joins me to talk about the ever-evolving and ever-changing adult entertainment industry. We'll also find out about his intersection between porn, religion, and homosexuality. Plus, we'll find out about this true amazing story that happened to him that involves a hanger, a tie, and 2 bushes. Plus, in hour 2, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house. And on this episode, I'm featuring some classic new wave, some gay electronic, and more. All that lies ahead as we start Journey 414 through Rainbow Country. And our first stop, the Rainbow Country Bookstore. Today, award-winning author Karen Michelson reads from her novel, The Maynard'S God, a novel that tells a story of murder, music, spirituality, and queer romance. By the way, on Amazon.ca, the book has a rating of 4.4 out of 5 stars.
I kept looking at him, at his words and dark hair and smiling dark eyes and arrestingly classical features, trying to know who he was right now. I kept seeing his performances and hearing all his poetry and his music. Bass lines, lines of poetry. The ancients didn't separate poetry from music. Anyone touched or tainted with enough divinity to do one did both, because there wasn't a both. There was only the compulsion of verse. Didn't verse once mean a turning into? Wasn't the first act of creation the universe, meaning the one turning into, as in God turning itself into everything it wanted, as in poets turning one line into another, one section of music into the next, or the artist turning your own emptied life into whatever you wanted to be before the world? Make me a hero so I can speak freely. I'll pay you with applause. He belonged to another line, to the scattered procession of Dionysus's heedlessly illegitimate children, like passion flowers lurking out of the mad corners of old centuries, who for all their divine pretense couldn't be anything other than what they were, who could do nothing but strum lutes and mandolins and bass guitars and chant prose poems to keep misfits awake and dreaming for generations. What was it like to be so helplessly powerful with an energy so attractive it keeps pulsing in open hearts through centuries? He was closer to the words I read at night than to me. That alone made me know he was already closer to me than my own words. I gazed across the quiet water, bird in the distance like a lost sea pigeon, then gone. I knew I had some power here. It was entirely up to me whether I saw him again. He would come to New England and perform, but I needn't insist he visit me when he came. I could go home, go back to the drug war, see the McCrae case to its end, and there an end. I could say what I wanted to say, get in my car, make the long trip home right now. I would feel foolish, maybe even sick. I would be afraid of my own dreams for a while, and music would make me feel desolate. But at least I would know for the rest of my life that I had said it, that I was once moved enough to say it. If I needed to, I could always pretend that this conversation never happened and comfort myself in knowing that no one would ever have to know how deeply the pretending cut. Thought of all the books I'd read on fall days because the stories were better than anything I found in life. Hated the betrayal when the books ended. Needed the fiction to get through the social hypocrisy that tore me apart every day. Hated the need. Knew I would hate myself worse if I didn't have the need. Felt the same surge I'd only felt once before in my life, when a suspect caused me to make a snap decision and shoot to kill. Knew I was likely killing again. That I was risking the remnant of my true self that had somehow evaded society's jackboots. I love you. Done. I'd never found anybody I could honestly say that to before. Anybody I could honestly imagine enough to love. He was a painting, a myth, a melody that wouldn't stop. Loved the way the bard sang about it. A last chance at belief before the absolute horror of nothing set in for the rest of my life. More cold and deadly than the deadly contrast of this moment. I'd said my prayer. Please, God, have mercy. Don't say you don't exist. Cool. I love you too. But the band wasn't trying to lose me or bring me in. I was there, and they were there, and Jade seemed quietly all right with it. So the rest of them were. Item. No one offered me information on the Rome murder or anything else, and I didn't ask, because I couldn't bring myself to trespass against the sacredness of our communion. It was a natural coming together for a night. My first. Marty kept passing bottles around to wild pledges. We drank to the CN Tower. We drank to Queen's Park as we sat passing stories under a tree there like Canterbury pilgrims flying at a verbal jam session. Les told tales of Juilliard. They used to put razor blades between the piano keys to encourage accuracy in playing. Did it work? Sometimes, he said dryly. We made up glary nursery rhymes. We drank to the Queen. We drank on the steps of the Parliament building under gracious arches that looked like the facade of another century. And Jade was moving pictures through words and beer, and we were all doing our drunken best to help. I don't remember the pictures, but one had fire and burned when we spoke it. We were a shadow government holding court and trying the night. Innocent and dark as stars turning out into space. No one could touch the little circle of our feeling. We called down storms and pretended to see them. And then we ran loose all over the city, and at one point it rained, and we drank to the Royal Ontario Museum. Or maybe that was Sunday, and we took shelter in the museum's planetarium where the rain scorched the roof and so made the sound of whatever the universe constantly expands into. We sang old songs. And then we drank to the Arctic plain of Canada, stretching into the planet's empty night. I don't know where we went and where we were. The afternoon was spare and gray except for us. The city was kind. I think we ate. I think I paid. The night came again all moony before I left. We walked through dreams and sang. Marty displayed his insanity without apology, and Les kept trying to get me lost in logical propositions that resolved themselves in dry-witted jokes, and Xander kept shadowboxing with visions in the air, and Jade was simply with me more often than not, keeping the spirit of everything I ever wanted, holding and intense.
When we talk about the LGBTQ community as if it is something that just exists, I think we're indulging in wishful thinking. Communities aren't something that spring fully formed from the ether. They require some assembly. They need to be constructed. Still thinking about the 70s here, when I came out in Toronto, there were lots of different parts that didn't quite fit together. First, there were gay men who went to bars and baths. Most were pretty deeply in the closet. They shared a dirty secret and some overlapping friendship networks, but not much else. Then there were a self-proclaimed clutch of young activists around the body politic and the Gay Alliance towards equality, myself included, who tended to be a bit judgmental about anyone not properly out and willing to throat ram. In fact, one writer to the body politic called us the high-principled Jesus Christ farts of the movement. Then there were the new class of gay entrepreneurs who were establishing the first gay businesses along Church Street. The Community Homophile Association was perhaps the largest organization in town, and it was run by George Hislop, a part owner of several of these businesses. The entrepreneurs saw the activists as troublemakers rocking a precarious boat, and we saw them as conservatives unable to embrace gay liberation. We felt much the same about MCC, the major gay-focused Christian organization at the time. When women from Chat, calling themselves the Cunts, broke off and denounced Hislop as a sexist in 1971, it made clear that a lot of women were also on a pretty different wavelength. Most lesbians were much more comfortable in feminist circles than hanging around with gay men. Not that they all agreed either. There were always the lesbian socialist feminists versus the radical feminist lesbians, and so on. Trans organizing was small and generally had little to do with any of us. Trans men were often concerned with distinguishing themselves from lesbians, and trans women were unwelcome in most lesbian spaces. Gay men were generally suspicious, unclear on the differences between sexual orientation and sexual identity. So it was all a bit of a hot mess. I suppose if you see community like a dysfunctional family where everybody fights all the time, you could call it a community. But if by community you mean people who are cooperating and fighting for a common goal, that probably didn't really happen until the 1980s, when we were all faced with challenges that we couldn't overcome alone. This is Tim McCaskill, a gay liberation dinosaur from another planet and author of Queer Progress.
When I return, adult entertainer Dallas Steele.
Hi, this is Michael Anthony Alago, music executive, photographer, author, and you are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Dallas Steele, hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's been a long day, but I'm happy to be with you.
Well, I have to say thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about all things you. Before we get friends
would say that's my favorite subject, but it's actually not. It's like I'm pretty much about it, the world and everyone at large.
Before we get started, you said you had a bit of an interesting day. What would you like to share?
Well, I should probably mention this Band-Aid on my nose, and that's because I went to see my dermatologist, who, by the way, is the first trans dermatologist in Palm Springs. She started about 6 months ago. And anyway, she was looking at my nose and she says, I think that might be skin cancer. We need to take a biopsy. So I have a bit of a gash in my nose, but it's certainly worthwhile if it detects that it might be cancerous and I have to, have something taken out of there. Skin cancer is no joke, and Palm Springs gets a whole lot of sun. And we certainly have a lot of visitors from Canada, I should say, because in our season from October to April, about 40% of our population is Canadian.
Wow.
And so Canadians take this as a message: wear sunscreen when you come to Palm Springs.
Well said. Well said. So you are a former news anchor and reporter for, I believe, over 20 years for both Fox and CBS. I believe you were nominated for 2 Daytime Emmy Awards. Congrats on that.
Thank you. I should say, actually, I have worked for affiliates of all of the major networks at some point. I say affiliates because there's a distinct difference between network ownership and affiliate ownership. Affiliates are often owned by other broadcasting companies, not necessarily the parent company. For instance, the Fox station that I worked for was owned by Nexstar Broadcasting. It was not owned by the Fox network. So there is a difference between affiliation and ownership. Nonetheless, yes, I was nominated for 2 regional Emmys while in Dallas-Fort Worth, and that was with the CBS owned and operated station there, KTVT, CBS 11. So that actually was owned by the network, but the other stations were not. I'm super honored to have had that. And, I didn't win, but as the saying goes, it's still an honor. Likewise, in the porn industry, I've been nominated a number of times for GayVN, and I still have yet to ever win a GayVN. I have some Grammys, but I've never won a GayVN.
Well, you just mentioned that you are an adult entertainer. Girl, you're a porn star, okay? so let's start. Let's continue there. Porn. You do gay porn?
Really?
So how did you get into this industry? When did you get into this industry? What year did you start?
Well, as you may have read, it's not entirely a happy story of how I came into doing porn. It was 2014, and my partner of 13 years had taken his life. And my best friend came to me and said, you've decided you don't want to go back to television news. You've always wanted to do porn. You're not getting any younger. What are friends for when they say that? I was 54 or 44 at the time. And he said, you're going to be homeless in a matter of weeks if you don't do something, because working part-time as a bartender isn't going to cut it, so you better find something quick. So I thought about it, and I applied with Colt and with Titan. And in 2 weeks, both called me, and I was scheduled for shoots. So it was a rather quick process that happened. And then it kind of took off from there. I did, in the 10 years since, I've done movies for Raging Stallion, for Pride Studios, and a whole lot of stuff for Carnal Media, which is Fun Size Boys, Twink Top, Scoutmaster, and Masonic Boys. So in all, probably about 70 studio films. And then my OnlyFans and Just for Fans, probably a little over 400 now. So I've done some work.
So let's take a step back. So you get into porn in around 2014. Before that, you had the successful career as a news broadcaster. Why would you leave that?
Well, success is defined in different ways, I guess. Successful in the sense that, I had moved up to bigger and bigger markets, and I had ascended up to be a main anchor at NBC2 in Naples, Fort Myers, Florida. And that was all good, but it was also very stressful. And, people talk about work-life balance now, and that's pretty important. I think a lot of Americans have kind of lost sight of that. It's a lot of work and not much home. So there's not much balance in their lives. And you have to find that balance. And sometimes a career can and will interfere with that. in my case, I felt like television news had become so stressful in my life that I was drinking a lot. I was sleeping on my breaks in my car. I had so much stress. I stopped going to the gym. I started overeating, all of that. One day, the overnight ratings were on the wall, and I was in for another discussion about what they thought I did wrong when it wasn't necessarily anything I did wrong. But they said, we've been talking to people here in our focus group research, and we found that people here just don't like you. And my ratings at that point were up from when I had started, and I thought things were going well. But at that point, what? They said, we're going to pay you for the rest of your contract. And I decided within really minutes of hearing that I was done. I just didn't want the stress of coming in every day and feeling like your job was on the line. And television news is very much that way if you're the main face of a station, because everything kind of comes back to you. You're the first person they look at when the ratings aren't good. So after the contract ended, I was happy to step away from it. But there's actually 5 years between when I left television news and when I started porn. I think people often think that, I walked from the news set to the porn set, and that's absolutely not the truth. There was a lot of thinking about what I wanted to do next after news.
In those 5 years, yeah. Did you feel like you had lost a sense of who you were? Because here you are for over 20 years being the face of news on different stations, and now what am I? Now who am I?
Yeah, I had a little bit of that, but it was, I don't want to say midlife crisis, although maybe it was, but I was thinking it's like, I invested 24 years in this. Is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I'm not saying that porn is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's been great. I enjoy making movies. I'll probably continue to make movies until people are repulsed. But, I'm going to have another act after porn as well, as I, slow down or stop or whatever it is that I'm going to do in the future. I feel like, I may have another act. And I talked about this with your interview colleague, Jason Collins, who is a great interviewer, by the way, that, politics is something that is kind of in my blood, and who knows, I may run for city council here one day.
Wow. From your lips to God's ears.
Well, right now I've taken on a job as the manager of 2 clothing stores and their online website here. And it's a great company. I'm really enjoying the job. It started out as part-time and it's kind of become full-time. So between that and my OnlyFans and Just for Fans and talking with fans and making promotions and all that's involved with running your own business, I pretty much right now am running 2 businesses. Anytime I'm off work from the brick and mortar job, I'm working on the OnlyFans and Just for Fans. Not that I don't enjoy it, but it is work.
You just mentioned OnlyFans, Just for Fans. Technology has evolved, the adult entertainment space incredibly. Like, people can be in their bedroom by themselves with, a smartphone and an internet connection, and they can make money, on sites like OnlyFans, Just for Fans, Chatterbait, all that sort of stuff. For yourself, how do you see this evolution? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's great. And people think I'm disparaging the studios when I say this, but I think it's great that performers can basically have their own studio now. They don't need studios. Now, studios still do very much have a place in porn, in that companies like Falcon produce some really amazing high quality porn. I don't dispute that. But I also think that there's a market for what content creators produce and how it's, homeschool, although some of it doesn't look very homeschool anymore. But there's something to be said for having control over your own destiny and running your own business. It's also a lot of work. But I think it's great that performers now have the autonomy to create more diverse content. I mean, for years and years and years, studio content was pretty much limited to only that which they thought might make money. And if they didn't believe it was marketable, then they wouldn't produce it. And now you have all these genres of all kinds of different things available on OnlyFans and Just for Fans that you didn't have before. So I think that part of it's been positive. And honestly, anytime that I've had a commercial movie come out, it also sees a boost in my OnlyFans and Just for Fans subscriptions. So I look at studio work, and I think this is probably a healthy way to look at it, as promotion for my OnlyFans and Just for Fans. Because if people like what they see, they're going to check that out, and they'll probably check your own sites out as well. So I think studios definitely have a place in our great promotion. And there's certainly, I can't say this enough, men.com, some outstanding work in terms of telling stories, creating images and fantasies. I think they're fantastic in what they do.
Do you see yourself as an independent, adult entertainment creator?
This is Tigger, by the way.
Hey, Tigger.
Get down, girl. She's 3 years old. She's very active.
And wants to be part of the show.
Always.
And so she should be.
Oh my gosh.
All voices welcomed.
OnlyFans and Just for Fans that she's appeared in. It's like, I'll be blowing a guy and she'll be right there on the bed.
Do you see yourself as an independent creator?
Yeah, I do, very much, in terms of, I do what I want to do. I have sex with men on camera that I want to have sex with. Whereas when you're with a studio, it kind of, they decide all of that. Not that there's ever any unattractive people, people always ask, well, what if a studio wants you to have sex with someone you're not attracted to? Most studios are pretty choosy about the guys they use. I've never once in 10 years of porn had someone I wasn't physically attracted to. I said physically, because there's certainly lots of personality types and certain attitudes that, that wasn't so great, but they're all attractive. But when I do OnlyFans and Just for Fans, I choose who I want to shoot with, and I choose, what kind of scene I want to do, whether that's like a minute play thing in suits or leather or, jock straps, I don't know, or it could be using toys. It could be incorporating an F machine, sling. I don't know. Every movie's a little different, and every screen partner is a little different in, what you discuss about what you want.
Do you ever license your content to studios?
Oh, I've been contacted about that from several that have wanted to buy some of my library. And I'm not ready to do that just yet, but, probably in a few years, when I slow down and I'm not making 1 or 2 movies every week, I'll probably sell some of that off. I would consider that. Certainly there are hybrid websites like rfc.com where you have studio produced content and then you have creator produced content, and it's an interesting mix. And the subscriber, pays one fee and gets to see both. I want to preserve my business with OnlyFans and Just for Fans, so I put my older movies on there, and then I put my newer stuff on my sites. But I think there's definitely a growing market for that kind of hybrid product where you have studio and creator content together.
And on that note, we'll return after this Rainbow Country update.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
A couple weeks ago, I heard from a listener who listens to Rainbow Country on CKCU-FM in Ottawa, Hillbilly, and he writes, "Happy Rainbow Canada Day! ! Had a good buddy, crossdresser, was cool, married to a woman. She was tired of it after years. He was embarrassed a bit. We told him, no problem, big deal. So what? Well, Hillbilly, I couldn't have said it better myself. Big deal. So what? So, as you know, Rainbow Country airs on broadcast radio, as well as on streaming services, and is also available as an edited podcast. A lot of those services have one thing in common. They are listener supported. So, if you think what I'm doing here on Rainbow Country, now award-winning Rainbow Country, if you think what I'm doing by giving voice to the LGBT community through interviews, through spotlights, playing queer artists from around the world, if you think this is worthwhile, I hope you will consider making a donation to this very outlet you are tuned to. If you are listening to the edited podcast, consider making a donation to an outlet that does carry Rainbow Country. How can you do that? Simple. Head over to marktara.com and hit the donation banner, because that's where you'll find all the outlets that do carry Rainbow Country. A little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. Now back to my one-on-one with gay adult entertainer, Dallas Steele.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us, and of course our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joey Lamar, best-selling author of Mambo Lips and Salsa Hips, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
So Dallas Steele, you've been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. You are an adult entertainer. You're also a person of faith. And we were talking about porn before and your news broadcasting, but you're also a person of faith. Talk to me, and I'm assuming that you're gay.
Oh yes, identifies.
How do you square that? How do you square those relationships, being gay, doing porn, and being a person of faith, when, there's that saying, love the sinner, hate the sin. How do you work around all those things?
That particular phrase was never in the Bible. Someone came up with that long after the Bible was written. And, at this point, only about 50% of Christians believe the Bible is the absolute word of God. And my church back in Dallas, the Cathedral of Hope, the largest predominantly gay church in the world, takes the examination that the Bible was created by human beings and can be flawed. It is not absolute, that it's subject to interpretation. And
so it's not necessarily like a fundamentalist take on it.
Right. That's not the absolute truth of God. I think the absolute truth of God is your relationship with him and how you've come to connect with him and be with him. People who use the Bible as their only connection to God, I think they're missing out on a lot. Because I know with my faith, and I was never involved in faith until I was early 40s, when I was baptized at Cathedral of Hope and became a member there. And I really didn't have a concept or a relationship with God at all. I mean, my parents were not atheists, but they certainly were not people of strong faith. And so all of that has been in my 40s. And part of that comes from, my partner had taken his life, and my church took care of his service and his reception and all of that, and was amazing to me when his family really wasn't and had kind of cut me out of things. So God works through people, and that's probably my best affirmation of what my faith means. Because when I see people doing great things and being kind to others and being kind to me, I feel like that's God working through them. And I try to do that when I get a tap on the shoulder. Hey, you need to do this. You need to do this. You need to compliment that person. You need to help that person. That's not to me, that's not conscience. That's God talking to you and saying, hey, you need to do this. This is your place. This is what I want you to do. And so I try to follow that. I feel when it comes to sex, I feel God wants us to have sex and lots of it. I think he wants us
Otherwise, why would he create us this way?
Right. And I think, God sees sex and love as the two highest forms of expression, of human expression. And I can't imagine how God would not want two human beings to connect in that way and have that pleasure. And in the case of a love relationship, love together. I mean, that seems like amazing to me. And, people who are having sex generally are not fighting. That seems like a great connection to me and something that God would love. So I don't see a disparity between being gay and being a person of faith. I think God loves everyone. I think God is there for everyone. It's people that have gotten in the way of that in the form of organized religion.
Well said.
Yes. Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yes, exactly. And there are many, many affirming churches out there now. Yeah. And, even the Methodists that were split originally, they're starting to come around too. So, there's a lot of positive out there, and I am not dismissing the horrific experiences that many people have had growing up with fundamentalist churches or Southern Baptist churches. My partner of 10 years, he was homeschooled in Southern Baptist, and his stories are horrific. But he and I, despite all that, both of us are still people of faith. And when something good happens to us, we do thank God. When we need something, we do pray for it. So, even with his experience, he still recognizes that there's something good in it for him. And I would say this, it's like, even if someone is atheist, what is the harm in letting someone believe something as long as they present it with good intentions and don't use it to harm others? You understand what I'm saying with that? Yeah. I mean, if they're not doing harm and it's causing them to do good in the world, let them be.
So talk to me about relationships then. When you have a personal relationship with God, you have relationships with friends. when it comes to intimate relationships, how do you maintain those, especially being active in adult entertainment? How do you, have sex with your partner without it feeling like it's a job?
Well, my partner also does OnlyFans and Just for Fans. So sometimes we shoot things together, but sometimes he shoots me and sometimes I shoot him with guys. So we both have a little of that, but we both know that with he works full time. I have the two jobs really. And so time is very limited. So we both know that as awkward as it might sound, you have to kind of schedule your intimate time. You have to kind of set aside that and say, all right, tonight, when you get home, we're gonna get it on and have fun. And so, you're not going to jack off that day. Maybe you're not going to have sex that day and shoot anything. Maybe you're just going to save yourself for a couple days and plan for that time. But it does, when you're super, super busy, it does have to be planned. I think what you were asking is more about the jealousy part. And I'm fortunate in that, my partner is not the jealous type. And after 10 years, he knows that I'm not going anywhere. I'm very happy with him in all ways. We really never argue. He's excellent to me, and I love him very much. He's an excellent man.
Are there certain rules that you have being in a relationship when you personally, when you go to work, doing your job as an adult entertainer? Are there certain do's and don'ts?
Like
try not to get too emotionally involved with the person, or.
I try to be emotionally involved with the person. When I'm shooting with someone, when I first started studio work, I realized my goal for the day is I want to get into your head, and I want me in your head as much as possible, to the point that I would tell my partner, do not contact me on a shoot day. Don't text me, don't call me, don't anything, because I have to be totally in that moment with the person I'm shooting with. And I'm still a bit like that with shooting OnlyFans and Just for Fans. I want to, even if it's just for an hour or 2 hours, I want to be totally with that person and connected with that person. But my partner knows very well that when that time is over, that he's still my partner and we're still number one. Now, I might become friends with that screen partner, and I might continue to be in contact with them and have an affection for them. But I know who my partner is, and nothing changes that. And we both know that we're super solid in that. Same thing when he shoots with someone. I would never even think of having him having an affection for someone else or a relationship. We've been, as I said, together 10 years, and I'm the only boyfriend he's ever had, and I'm the only person he's ever lived with. So that's kind of fun, but it's also a responsibility that I feel like I need to be good for him.
So Dallas Steele, I want to turn this conversation around, and because I only have you for a handful of minutes left, but you have an interesting story that deals with a hanger, a tie, and two bushes.
You have to help me.
A hanger, a tie, and a bush. You were sent to an airline hangar at one point. To interview a former U.S. president.
Bush. Yes. When I was with CBS 11 in Dallas, and this is a good story. I like telling this one. Governor Perry in Texas was campaigning for re-election, and he had President H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, the current president, and they were campaigning throughout the state. I'm going to preface this with, regardless of how you feel about Republicans and Democrats or politics, a president is still a president, except maybe Trump. Well, I'll say that. That's an exception. But they had been campaigning with Governor Perry, and there was one last stop in Dallas at Dallas Love Field at like 11 p.m. Our news Central Time, 10 p.m. was already over, but they sent me to the hangar anyway to try and, see if they would say anything. Well, we were positioned in the hangar. The Secret Service came. The photographers got searched. I got searched, all of that. But I was expecting a huge crowd of press. And it was just me and two photographers from the Dallas Morning News and my photographer from the station. And the Air Force One landed, stopped outside. All the national press shuffled right by because they didn't expect that, anyone was actually going to speak. Well, we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And pretty soon, HW, and Rick Perry all walked right towards me in the hangar. And I am kind of like, wow, what am I going to say? Because I hadn't planned to ask the questions. I thought there'd be a ton of reporters there and I wouldn't even have the opportunity. But suddenly I'm face to face with a president, a former president, and a 4-time governor. So I said, how you doing, guys? And Rick Perry immediately launched into part of his stump speech. And then the two presidents said a bit too. And I was fixated on HW's tie. And I said, excuse me, Mr. President, but your tie looks a bit frayed. And we're all tired. And he said, yeah. He said, Barbara dressed me and it was at 4 a.m. this morning. I don't think she saw how frayed that tie is. And being a reporter, you eat a lot in the car. And what happens when you eat in the car, you get it all over you. And I always carried at least one extra tie in my bag. And so, like I said, I got one of those taps from God on the shoulder. So I reached down into my bag and got the tie out. And I said, I think you need a new tie, Mr. President. And he accepted it very graciously and said, thank you. And then they walked off. But I know HW had one of my ties. I never saw him wear it, but he had it.
Well, on that perfect note, Dallas Steele, well said, well done, well made with all your endeavors. And
thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate this.
All right. Thank you so much.
That was my interview with gay adult male entertainer Dallas Steele. Quick update on Mr. Steele. Turns out his skin issue is non-cancerous. Great news. To keep up to date on this artist, you can find him on socials at Dallas Steele XXX. When did gay pride become just pride?
I can answer that for you, and I can answer what the big turnaround was, and it's a very simple thing. Corporatism is when gay pride became pride. As soon as we got corporate sponsors, as soon as we had the approval of the corporations around us, oh my God, the beer company's going to sponsor it, and they're going to give us a float, and look at the telephone company's going to do something, and someone else is going to do something.
But drop the gay.
Yeah, drop the gay and include everyone. And I always thought, why should we include everyone? This is a gay pride celebration. It is for people who are in a sexual minority. We had something that was for us to make people recognize who we are and to acknowledge that we actually existed.
Award-winning playwright and author Brad Fraser reflects on some important gay history. The time frame, the 1990s. When gay pride becomes pride, with the introduction of corporate sponsorships.
The phone rings. I got a message from the mayor. He's going to call me back the next day. I get the call, and he said, if you'd accept, we'd like to honor you with the key to the city. There was an event later that year in May. Just a key, right? Like, key to what? A decent job, a good singing career. It's really a metaphor, but it's history. So a reporter wants to talk to me and says, so it's a key, right? Like, what's the big deal? I said, well, not everybody gets the key. So I looked it up, and I guess it is kind of a Big deal.
The date, May 17th, 2018, when trans activist Susan Gapka made history by becoming the first trans woman to be presented with the key to the city of Toronto. By the way, past recipients include Rush and the Raptors. And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com where everything is connected and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out my socials at Mark Tara. The podcast is available on all major platforms. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, we are living in days of making dreams come true, so believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.
Hi, everybody. This is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.